Welcome to Coyote's Corner. This episode, we'll be listening to Michael Lang tell an original tale, Under the Willow Tree.
On a warm summer's day, little Coyote set out from his burrow. He promised his mother he would be home before dark. Then he went out into the forest, wandering about. But he suddenly heard the sound of music, and he followed that music to a familiar grove of trees. It was the place where his uncle's burrow lay. But Uncle Coyote was not in his burrow that day. Uncle Coyote was sitting in a nearby meadow, playing his guitar. Little Coyote ran to him. "Uncle Coyote, what are you doing?" "Ah, my nephew, I am sitting here, under the willow tree." Little Coyote was very confused. He looked all around. He looked up, and he looked down. But there was no willow tree to be found. "Uncle Coyote, there's no willow tree here." "But, my nephew, there once was. Come, sit beside me, and I will tell you the tale of the willow tree." And so little Coyote sat beside his uncle, and Coyote put aside his guitar. "When I was your age, the willow tree stood right here on this spot, its branches reaching high up into the sky. Close your eyes. Imagine the tree." Little Coyote closed his eyes, and he tried to imagine the tree. And he could. He could feel the bark against his back. He could hear the wind whispering through its branches. "Little Coyote, there was a certain branch on that tree I would climb to. I would sit upon that branch and I would play my music." Little Coyote could feel the branch underneath him. He could feel the branch swaying in the breeze. "But Uncle Coyote, what happened to the tree? Where did it go?" "Ah, my nephew, one night there was a terrible storm. The wind was howling all about. The lightning was flashing, the thunder rolling. Were you afraid, Uncle Coyote?" "I was very afraid, my nephew. I thought the whole forest was going to blow away. Then I heard the cracking of the trunk. I peered out of my burrow, and I saw the tree falling towards me, but then it stopped. It turned, it fell into the wind. As though the tree had decided it was not going to land on me that night." "But Uncle Coyote, trees can't do that. Trees can't decide things like that." "Are you sure, my nephew? A tree can't fall into the wind either, but the willow tree did." "Why would it do that, Uncle Coyote?" "Perhaps it was the tree's way of saying thank you for all the music I'd played for it." "Uncle Coyote, that's silly. Trees can't hear. They don't have ears." "Are you sure, my nephew?" Before little Coyote could say anything in reply, his uncle tackled him and began to tickle him. Little Coyote squealed with laughter. Then he sprang to his feet. He and his uncle ran through the meadow, laughing and chasing one another. And when they were tired, they sat under the willow tree once more. "Now, my nephew, you tell me a story." "But Uncle Coyote, I don't know any stories." "Are you sure?" "No, I don't, but how did you learn your stories?" "Ah, my nephew, I listened, just as you are doing right now. Now it's getting late. You'd best get home before your mother begins to worry." "All right. Uncle Coyote, can I come back tomorrow? Will you tell me another story?" "Of course, my nephew. I will wait for you here, under the willow tree." Then little Coyote sprang to his feet and made his way home. It was after dark when he arrived. His mother looked up from what she was doing. "And where have you been?" "Oh, I was with Uncle Coyote." "Well, I know that," his mother laughed. "But what mischief have the two of you been up to?" "Oh, we weren't doing anything, Mom. We were sitting under the willow tree." "The willow tree? There's no willow tree near your uncle's burrow." "But there once was. Uncle Coyote told me the story. Once upon a time, there was a willow tree."
That was Michael Lang telling Under the Willow Tree. I'm sitting down with Michael now to get some background on that story and see where it came from. Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely, Toby.
So, where did this story come from?
The story is actually based on a true story. There was, in fact, a willow tree that grew in my parents' front yard, and for whatever reason, I decided to write this story and take those elements of truth, but put them into a more fantasy, whimsical form.
So how did that tree come down?
That tree came down in a windstorm, and it had been raining for several weeks. The ground was very soft, and the tree just fell right over. But remarkably, like the tree in this story, the real willow tree fell in just the right way so as not to land on power lines. It glanced off the corner of my parents' house, but then it landed in a place where it really did as little damage as possible, and you think that it could have fallen 90 degrees different and landed in my parents' bedroom. There was a part of me that wondered, did that tree actually think about which way it wanted to fall? And this story sort of developed from that idea of, what if a tree could choose the way it wanted to fall?
And in the story, Coyote had a relationship with that tree. He sat in that tree,
Yes.
played his guitar.
And
Did your family have that relationship?
Yes, those elements of the story come from me as a child. When I was 12 years old, I was learning to play the trumpet, had always loved the outdoors, and I would often sit up in this tree. It had a certain branch that was maybe 5 feet off the ground, but it went out like a perfect seat that one could sit in. And as a 12-year-old, I would sit in that tree sometimes and play my 12-year-old rendition of jazz and blues, and probably driving the entire neighborhood insane. And so those elements of the story came from that, and the idea of, well, some people say that plants do enjoy music, and maybe, just maybe, that tree chose to fall the way that it did because it somehow liked that music.
I think all of us appreciate out-of-tune jazz and blues.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. But what prompted you to write this tale?
I think really the reason I started coming up with this story was trying to think of stories that I could tell to my own niece and nephew, children's stories that I could share with them that might be interesting. And as a result, I took Coyote, one of my favorite characters from folklore, and set him as the main character, talking to his own nephew and telling the story, really looking at the imagination aspect and really teaching his nephew how to appreciate a story.
And with that story, I mean, we were talking earlier about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and
Yes.
stories within stories.
Yes.
And this story really encapsulates the progress of a story from the event that happened, this willow tree almost falling on some coyote's poor burrow,
Right.
to him relating that story to his nephew hearing that story and relating it again.
Yes, that was a piece that we really added today during this recording session. I've only told this story once in the past, and so it was kind of a new concept to be coming in here with, to lay down in a recording, something I don't do that often. But in the process of doing that, we added this aspect of what happens to that story that Coyote has told his nephew. And the idea of stories are passed on, they change as time goes by. Coyote was probably embellishing the story a little bit. He is a trickster after all. Probably trying to entertain and impress his nephew, adding some elements to the story. When little Coyote goes home and his mother asks him, "What were you doing?" "Oh, you were with your uncle. What were the two of you doing? I know you were up to something." "Well, Uncle Coyote told me this story." And he starts to tell the story, and Under the Willow Tree ends with, "Once upon a time there was a tree." We don't really know what little Coyote is going to add to this story, but he's probably going to add something because that is the nature of a story.
Yeah, it grows with every telling, or
Right.
what shrinks in each telling with what you forget. Well, something had to go there, so I've got to put something in.
Right. Or maybe what mattered to little Coyote is different than what mattered to Coyote himself, and so the story is going to change to reflect that.
Yes. Well, thank you, Michael, for sharing that story and that process of creating that story with us.
Absolutely.
And to our audience out there, thank you for tuning into Coyote's Corner. If you want to hear more from Michael, check out his website at coyotesinc.com. You can listen to previous recordings we've done here at Studio 417. You can check out Michael's schedule, see where he's going to be performing live, catch him if you're in the area. And you can also purchase some CDs or some download tracks if you're interested.
And as always, don't forget to like, favorite, and share this episode so you never miss anything of what's happening here.
Until next time, this has been Coyote's Corner.